After paying social security their entire life, the retirees have no money for their pension. The pension system is broken. In this video, you will find out what is the pay-as-you-go system, why is it increasingly unsustainable, what parameters can be changed within the system, what would be a better alternative to the current system, and how can AI influence the future of pensions. Let's start by describing the system. Pay-as-you-go is a public social security system. The government collects a special tax, usually called social insurance contribution, from the currently employed population. The collected money is then used for payment of the pensions to current retirees. This is the fundamental, yet often misunderstood characteristic. The workers do not save any money for their own retirement. The collected pool of money is spent immediately on a monthly basis. The current working population will be dependent on the generations coming after them for their pension, and so on. This leads us to why the system is becoming increasingly unsustainable, especially in the developed economies. The absolutely crucial number here is the ratio of working people that are paying the social insurance to the retirees that are receiving the pension. The first pension system in the world was introduced in Germany in the 1880s by the Iron Chancellor Otto von Bismarck. Shortly after its introduction, it turned into a pay-as-you-go system. Back then, people were eligible to receive the pension after reaching the age of 70. The life expectancy was incredibly lower than today, mostly due to wars and diseases, so the majority of the people never even made it to 70. Those who did spent on average only several years in pension. Consequently, the ratio of workers to retirees was very high. Today, the typical retirement age is 65, and a fraction of the population leaves for early retirement. At the same time, life expectancy has grown by decades in the last century, so vast majority of people live long enough to see retirement, and at least in developed economies, they spend on average some 20 years in retirement. Such development caused a steep increase in the number of pension recipients. In other words, rising life expectancy, although good for the people, is creating problems for the financial sustainability of the pension system. The other development, which worsens the situation further, is the declining birth rate. For most of the 20th century, the birth rate remained very high, while the child mortality radically decreased. This led to an unprecedented surge in population, but importantly, each new generation was larger than the previous one. However, in many countries, the birth rates have been steadily declining since late 20th century. Not only has the population growth stabilized, but it even reversed. This problem is most pronounced in countries like Italy or Japan. As the larger generations leave for retirement and the smaller generations get into workforce, the ratio of workers to retirees will further deteriorate. Let's take a look at the old age dependency ratio. This is the ratio of working age population defined as people aged 20 to 64 to people aged 65 plus. Not so long ago, in 2000, there was on average almost 5 working age people for 1 retiree in OECD states. Today, this ratio is barely 3 to 1, and according to various projections, it will drop to 1.8 to 1 by 2050. But it's even worse than that. Obviously, not everyone in the working age is actually working. The unemployment statistics tell you only about the people that are not employed but are looking for work. However, there is a much larger group which is not even looking for work at the time. They are said to be outside of the labor force. Among those are students, mothers on maternal leave, housewives, disabled people, etc. Summed up, only around 70% of people in the working age category are employed, and that includes part-time jobs. Consequently, if you adjust the old age dependency ratio, you will find out that already today there are less than 2.5 actually working people per 1 retiree, and by 2050 this will drop to less than 1.5 to 1. Even if the birth rate magically skyrocketed tomorrow, it would take some 20 to 25 years before the children would grow up and join the workforce. In other words, it is basically impossible to reverse this development before the middle of this century. Countries like Germany are trying to alleviate this problem with mass immigration. But such strategy is not very clever even from economic perspective, let alone other considerations. It is obvious that something will have to change. By the way, I am focusing here on the pension system, but socialized healthcare utilizes the same principle of generational redistribution, and so it faces the very same problems. I have to ask you for a favor. I put a lot of effort into these videos. If you feel that I deserve it, please consider subscribing to this channel and hit the like button. So what are the variables that politicians can change within this system? First, they can increase the retirement age. Second, increase the social insurance contributions paid by the workers. Or third, decrease the pensions. Let's look at them one by one. Raising the retirement age would increase the ratio of workers to retirees. Given the gains in average life expectancy during the last 100 years, this might seem as a no-brainer. However, the health span has not increased as much as the lifespan. In other words, even if we live on average 15 years longer than 2 generations ago, you can't say that today 80-year-olds are as fit and healthy as 65-year-olds used to be in 1950. This solution would be met with another problem. Many people can confirm that if you lose a job in your late 50s, it is much harder to find a new employment. And no wonder, when it comes to manual labor, the employers know that the older person will have much less energy than a younger person. In white-collar jobs, there are increasing requirements for technological sophistication. Said bluntly, you won't hire a grandpa who barely knows what Facebook is for a social media marketing position. It is no surprise then that increasing the retirement age is incredibly unpopular. In France, which has comparably quite low retirement age, the recent increase from 62 to 64 has led to widespread and even violent protests. Given the massive demographic change, a small increase wouldn't suffice. After playing with several population pyramids, it seems that many countries would have to raise the retirement age to 71 or 72 by the middle of the century just to retain the today's 3:1 old age dependency ratio. And even today, the system is already very burdensome. Another option is to increase the social security and healthcare contributions. That would inevitably decrease the living standard of all workers, since more of their gross income would be clawed back by the state and the take-home earnings would therefore decrease. And we are not talking about small sums. Remember, the projected decrease in the old age dependency ratio is from 3:1 to 1.8:1 by 2050. That is, some 67%. If the state currently deducts 30% of your gross income for social security and healthcare contributions, then if nothing else changed, by 2050 this share would have to grow to half of your gross income. By gross income, I actually mean the total employer expense. This of course would not be as big of a problem if during those 3 decades the real wages would grow rapidly. However, during the last few decades, the real median income grew barely at all in both Europe and North America, so one should not be overly optimistic. This solution is bound to be extremely unpopular too, because it will affect the largest voting group possible, or the working people. The last option to make the system sustainable is to decrease the pension benefits themselves. This would lead to the decrease of living standards of the retirees. Such change, while also unpopular, might be the most feasible if the decline in pensions would be gradual and people would have long time to prepare. Again, to get some sense of the scale, in a country where the pensions are 50% of the median income, they would have to decrease to some 30% by 2050. In reality, none of these options will be used in isolation. The most likely scenario is a combination of all of them. So in the end, we will leave for retirement somewhat later, receive slightly lower pensions, after having paid slightly higher deductions our entire lives. There is one additional option within this system. The pension budget doesn't necessarily need to be balanced. The government can subsidize the system from general taxation, i.e., the normal state budget. Needless to say, that would divert some money from other state policies, such as education or infrastructure, and in the end, it would necessitate tax increases, which is the same as increasing the contributions. So no, that's not gonna cut it either. Given the situation, what would be a better alternative? There is a multitude of possible pension systems. Given the current demographic projections, however, the preferable alternative would likely be any system where people actually save money in form of assets on their own pension accounts. Pay-as-you-go made perfect sense a century ago when there were like 10 workers per one retiree. Now, the rationale for pay-as-you-go is disappearing. A person saving their entire career, let's say 40 years, can save a shitload of money with a reasonable return. For example, if you invest only $100 a month for 40 years with an average annual return of 6%, which is not unreasonable, then you put in $48,000 over your entire career but make over $150,000 in return, leaving you with $200,000 for your retirement. For such amount, you could buy annuity that would pay you over $1,000 per month for 20 years. You could still set up the system in such a way that it would include social solidarity. It wouldn't be a problem to devise this system, but the transition would be troublesome. Immediate switch would be great for people that have barely started their career. However, if all pension contributions would be diverted to personal pension savings accounts, there would be zero money for people that have already retired. And for those who are about to retire in the next several years, it would be also bad news because they don't have enough time to save a sufficient sum. The only possible scenario would be a very slow transition from one system to another, spanning at least 30 years. Each year, a slightly larger share of the payroll deductions would go to the personal pension savings accounts and correspondingly lower share for payment of the current retirees. The pension benefits would have to decrease each year accordingly by the same amount. So in the first few years, the new retirees would still have the majority of their income from the pay-as-you-go system and only a small supplement from the personal savings. In some 30+ years, the pay-as-you-go system could be phased out completely. Or not. Both systems could coexist side by side. Some remnant of the PAYC could remain as a tool for social solidarity policy. In any case, the transition would not be comfortable. The direction of demographic change is known for many decades, so the transition should have been long underway. The longer we wait, the more painful will it be. It would be a generational project requiring robust political consensus. I like to present a full and coherent case in my videos while also staying concise. Comment down below one important argument for the case and one against, which you think I should have mentioned and did not. This is where AI comes in. The economic landscape is shifting faster than ever. Uncertainty is the arch-enemy of long-term plans. One huge looming uncertainty is artificial intelligence. Politicians will be even more reluctant to propose a long unpopular pension system transition when they have no idea how the world will look like in 30 years and beyond. It is possible that AI revolution will create a super-rich fraction of population and a majority with no economic use that will live off universal basic income. Under such conditions, it is likely that politicians will rather tinker with the current pay-as-you-go system, increasing the retirement age here and there by a year or two, increasing the contributions by a few percentage points, etc. And because we live in extremely populist times, they will try to put the blame on the rich and promise to solve the problem by taxing them more. But given the sheer magnitude of the demographic shift, taxing the top 1% will not be enough to solve the problem. Not least because the people will at the same time also demand better healthcare, education, infrastructure, affordable housing, green transition, and so on. We are standing at the crossroads. What path will we take?